Welcome back. And now for the news in detail. We start from Iraq, where 6 people have been killed in a fresh air raid targeting a commander of the Hashd al-Shaabi militia in Baghdad. State media says the attack took place along the Taji camp, leading to a base of non-US coalition forces north of the capital. The coalition spokesman denied conducting the airstrike. Al-Shaabi said the raid targeted a convoy of the group's medics and not the senior leader. Police said many people have been killed and wounded without providing any specific details. The raid comes a day after an American airstrike killed the senior Iranian commander, Major General Qasem Soleimani. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump says he ordered the killing of Qasem Soleimani to stop a war, not start a new one. President Trump alleged Soleimani was plotting attacks on US diplomats and military personnel. Iran has told the UN it reserves the right to self-defense under international law. More in this report.
Tensions in the Middle East have remained high, but the US killing of Qasem Soleimani has tightened them even further. Speaking to his supporters in Miami, President Trump said Washington is not interested in regime change in Tehran, but will never hesitate to defend the American people.
He was plotting attacks against Americans, but now we've ensured that his atrocities have been stopped for good. They are stopped for good. I don't know if you know what was happening, but he was planning a very major attack, and we got him.
Iran has promised revenge, with Foreign Minister Javad Zarif saying retaliation could come any time and in any manner. In letters sent to the UN, Iran said the US airstrike invalidated American claims to be fighting terrorism. Foreign Minister Zarif said the US made a mistake.
Therefore, the Americans have made a big mistake in 3 dimensions. The dimension of violating Iraq's right of sovereignty, the dimension of violating international laws, and the dimension of bruising emotions in this whole region. And the response to these mistakes will be definitely out of the Islamic Republic's control.
The US says it is sending 3,000 additional troops to the Middle East as a precaution because of the rising threat to American forces in the region. For its part, the State Department said it would list the Iran-backed Iraqi militia Asaib Ahl al-Haq as a foreign terrorist organization. The US also classed its leaders, the brother Qais al-Khazali and Laith al-Khazali, as terrorists.
In the Middle East, reactions to the killing of Iran's elite Quds Force head Major General Qasem Soleimani were mixed, with the governments urging restraint. The 2 major powers, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, called for de-escalating the situation, while the US ally Israel backed the move. Saudi Arabia called on the international community to fulfill its responsibilities to take necessary measures to ensure regional security and stability. The UAE urged wisdom and political solutions above confrontation and escalation. Qatar warned of the continuation of escalation in Iraq, saying that could lead to unfortunate results. Bahrain and Egypt called for de-escalation and containing the situation, but Israel said it stands with the US in its struggle for peace, security and self-defense. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa calls for de-escalation in Middle East tensions. In a telephonic conversation with the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, General Bajwa stressed the need for maintaining focus on the Afghan peace process. Pompeo informed the Army Chief about the Middle East situation after the US airstrike in Baghdad. The UN Security Council meeting on providing aid to Syria's embattled Idlib province has failed to reach an outcome. Humanitarian aid that currently flows through the UN-designated checkpoints in Turkey and Iraq will come to an end on January the 10th. Diplomats say they have made no progress on the situation in Idlib. Officials have stressed the importance of renewing the urgently needed cross-border aid. The UN has called for an immediate ceasefire in Libya and urged the combatants to return to political dialogue. In a statement, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres said any foreign support to the warring parties will only deepen the conflict. Guterres repeated using restraint is essential to create an environment favorable to ending hostilities. The statement comes after Turkey's parliament agreed to send troops to Libya to support the government of national accord. In the meantime, the GNA said it no longer trusts the UN support mission in Tripoli. Meanwhile, General Khalifa Haftar has accused the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of attempting to revive the Ottoman legacy in Libya. In a televised address, Haftar said his forces accept the challenge of Turkish military intervention. Haftar called on Libyans to unite and take up arms against Erdogan, who he called a colonizer. The Eastern commander said the Libyan National Army victory in Tripoli is almost within reach. He said the battle will now become a war in the face of Turkey.
The enemy has announced war. He has advertised aggression and decided to invade our nation. He better stay watchful. The friendly Turkish people, which are tied to us by brotherhood in Islam, must stand in the face of this deranged gambler.
Greece has warned Ankara not to cross its red lines following a maritime jurisdiction accord between Turkey and Libya. In an interview, Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said Greece will not permit Turkish activities that infringe on its sovereign rights. Mitsotakis said Athens is ready to talk with its neighbors, including Turkey. He said if no agreement is reached, Greece will look to international jurisdiction for help. Athens said the deal between Ankara and Libya's government of national accord violates international maritime law and sovereign rights of Greece and other countries. In November, Turkey signed a maritime agreement with Libya to mark out exclusive economic zones in the eastern Mediterranean. In Nigeria, 19 people have been killed after gunmen invaded the Tawari community in Kogi state. Locals say the attackers burned homes and other buildings, including the palace of the local king. Police say the identity of the gunmen remains unclear. In Indonesia, the death toll from the floods has risen to 53 after torrential rains caused landslides in the capital, Jakarta. Disaster management officials warned the death toll may rise more. Officials said over 175,000 people have been displaced because of the river's flooding. The city's main airport has suspended operations. The authorities have decided to attempt cloud seeding in a bid to prevent further rainfall. River banks of Jakarta and nearby towns were inundated after heavy rain fell on December the 31st and January the 1st. The Met Agency said this is one of the most extreme rainfall events since the records began in 1866. In Cambodia, 10 people have died and 23 have been injured after a building in the town of Kep collapsed. Prime Minister Hun Sen says there are many people still trapped under the debris and rescue teams are digging them out. The governor of Kep, Ken Satha, said an unknown number of workers are trapped under the rubble. He said authorities have detained the building's owners for questioning. Satha said emergency crews are still working to remove concrete slabs and cutting through iron fittings to find more people. Cambodia is going through a construction boom to serve growing crowds of tourists and investors. In France, police have shot dead a man after he stabbed 4 people at a public park in Paris. In a statement, police said 2 of the victims are in critical condition. It said investigations have yet to establish a motive for the attack. In Bolivia, the Electoral Tribunal has set May the 3rd as the date to elect a new government. President Janine Áñez's interim government assumed power after President Evo Morales was forced out in November. Electoral Tribunal Vice President Oscar Hassan-Toffel said the elections will choose the president, vice president and members of the Legislative Assembly. He said a second round will be held if no clear winner emerges in the presidential vote. Morales' movement towards Socialism Party is the country's largest political faction. From exile, Morales said he expects his party to win the elections. The overthrown president stepped down after a wave of protests accused him of rigging elections in October. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Peru, heavy rains have caused flooding in central and northern parts of the country, washing out roads, fields and houses. Over 200 houses flooded in the city of Huánuco after 8 hours of rain burst the banks of the 2 rivers. In Pasco, local authorities called in urgent help from the Transport Ministry as the rivers wiped out the main highway. Peru is in the middle of its rainy season, which usually extends until April. In Australia, 2 more people have died on Kangaroo Island due to bushfires raging across the country. The government has called up over 3,000 military reservists to tackle the relentless crisis. Officials have also called a 3rd naval ship equipped for disaster and humanitarian relief as thousands have been forced to flee their homes. Bushfires on Australia's east coast have fueled catastrophic conditions. Temperatures soared above 40 degrees Celsius and gale force winds fanned hundreds of fires. Firefighters are battling to save lives and homes. The death toll from the fierce bushfires has risen to 23, with 21 people still missing. In northwest China's Xinjiang, Uyghur Autonomous Region, government-funded boarding schools are offering students better education opportunities. Authorities say many students from the local families now have a chance to change their destiny. More in this report.
Authorities say it is up to students and their parents to decide whether to attend a boarding school. Headmaster of the boarding school, Shadullah Matterson, said many children in the area could not receive education in the past.
Some students wanted to go to school, but there were not enough classrooms for their grades. Another important reason was poverty. Also, many rural parents were not aware of the importance of education.
Many students in the boarding school come from rural families. They dream to see the outside world. Kamarunisa Ahmed is one of them.
I have often got sick since I was a kid. My mother and other family members' health is also not so great, so I want to become a doctor.
Boarding schools are part of the national level drive to reduce poverty through education.
In China, a young photographer has filmed 70 glaciers to demonstrate the threat of global warming. After filming for 7 long years, he found glaciers are shrinking. What about the melting glaciers in this report?
One young Chinese man made it his mission to get up close and personal with glaciers. They are beautiful, but they won't look like this forever. This is the warning Wang Xiangjun brought to the UN's 25th Climate Change Conference in Spain. His documentary clearly showed what's left when a glacier vanishes, a barren, desolate landscape of sand and rocks.
After I shot more than 70 glaciers in Tibet, I found that all glaciers are shrinking. What does this mean? It means global warming is indeed a very serious thing happening around us.
In 2019, China beefed up its latest plans to protect the environment, a plan that includes glaciers, forests and wildlife. It was a year in which the country's forest reserve increased by 2.1 billion cubic meters last year.
China's firm determination and commitment to ecology protection has given everyone the dignity. Protecting the glaciers and protecting the homeland is no longer a slogan, but something that everyone can strive to do through practical actions.
Wang says we can all limit global warming by taking practical action.
Lows on the highs of the business world now. US electric car maker Tesla has reported a jump in its 4th quarter car deliveries. That has lifted company shares on the back of a boost in its US and Chinese output. The automaker delivered over 100,000 vehicles in the quarter ending on December the 31st. The figures come 4 days after Tesla delivered its first batch of Chinese-made cars from its new Shanghai Gigafactory. Tesla hit key targets last year in the critical ramp-up of its Model 3 vehicle. And now the weather situation from around the globe. that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.